Okay, if people are ready, we get started. I hope this mic works well enough. I know the room can be tricky in terms of echo. It's okay. You can hear in the back too. Welcome everybody. I'm happy to see you all here. We'll try to compete with the long line waiting to get into something in the Rogel Ballroom that I want to know what it is, but we'll have to find out later. My name is Johannes von Moltke. I have the honor of serving as the interim director of the International Institute that is happy to host you and to welcome you all to this afternoon's conversation on education in India. I especially want to welcome, obviously, our two distinguished guests, Ashok Lahiri and Sonam Wangchuk, as well as my colleague, Christy Merrill, who kindly agreed to moderate the conversation. I also wanted to, at this point, welcome the Consul General of India in Chicago, Somnath Ghosh, who I think will be joining us momentarily, but we decided to get started in the interest of time, and we'll welcome him maybe toward the end of today's events. Our topic for today is education in India, and I dare say the question could not be more timely. I'm not telling you anything new, nor does it take any type of political persuasion to agree if I say that education in this country is currently in the crosshairs. This is by design. Project 2025 laid out the attack plan long before the most recent election, and its architects will happily tell you, as Christopher Rufo told the New York Times in a long interview the other week, that the plan is for our current system of education to, and I'm quoting, to be just burned to the ground, gutted, and dismantled, end of quote. We've seen this plan in action at the Department of Education, whose gutting and dismantling has direct consequences for us working in the International Institute. For the time being, uncertainty about federal funding has left us to fly blind as we seek to continue our mission of producing and disseminating knowledge about the world, passing that knowledge on to teachers in workshops, and enabling students and scholars to do the requisite international field work for generating that knowledge in the first place. Our response to such challenges at the International Institute has been to double down on our core mission of international education and outreach. To that end, we bring together distinguished and diverse faculty and scholars with deep area studies and international expertise to enrich the university's intellectual environment and to provide the University of Michigan community with the knowledge, tools, and experience to become informed and active global citizens. As we describe in detail on our website, if you care to look, we advance this mission through education, engagement, and innovation, which is to say, through events like today's, which afford us the opportunity to look beyond our current conundrums, to gain insight and knowledge from other parts of the world, to generate comparative perspectives, to explore horizons for cooperation, collaboration, and mutual learning. With that said, I'd like to introduce our panelists before I make a couple of quick remarks about the proceedings, but so you are familiar with who you'll be hearing from. Great. Thank you for pointing that out. So then I'm happy to actually yield the floor for a minute to Somnath Ghosh, the Consul General of India in Chicago. If you'd like to say a few words. Pass this off to you. You can just hold it if you don't want to flip it.
Thank you. And sorry for coming late. Normally, bureaucrats do come late in our country, but this was not my fault this time. I couldn't find Pendleton. I was standing there for about 5 minutes. First of all, Madhumita ji and your team, a great thanks. This type of gathering we need more in the United States. to discuss, not only on education. Tomorrow, there is another program here, and I think I happen to go to a number of universities in the jurisdiction that we look after, and Ann Arbor is certainly one of the most active. So thank you for that. We have, I don't know whether already the panel discussion is over. Is it? Okay, good. So I didn't miss that. So I look forward to hearing our very eminent speakers. But just by way of starting, I'll try to outline how the Indian students in United States, the body of students are looking like today. Last year around this time in United States, there were about 356,000 Indian students. And that was the highest point. And the difference from earlier years, say 5 years or years before the COVID came, was suddenly we saw a surge in undergraduate students. That was not at least known to us before that. What happened in about the time span from June to August in 2024, we saw a drop. And from 356,000 or 57,000 around from that, the number today is, when I last looked up at the SEBI's data, the US data, it was 200, it's less than 260,000, 55, 60. So it's a drop of about 100,000, give and take a few thousand. We don't know yet exactly what is the reason of this sudden fall, but certainly there is a link to the job market in the United States, possibly other factors. We saw that the STEM students, I'm not even talking about others, they don't get internship in many cases. Then they all expect at least 3 years of OPT that they are not getting, and job is, of course, that's altogether a different issue. That led to this sudden drop. There may be other reasons, we don't know yet. Every student's family take their decision according to their own financial situation, which can often be quite difficult. In the last few years, I'm not talking of Ann Arbor. We have seen people coming from quite financially stressed background. Many of them take loans and their families make sacrifices which are not in the usual circumstances we'll think as normal. We feel that those are the type of students which have dropped out. The new students didn't come. And yet today, with this number, the total number of students from India and total number of students from China are more or less equal today. With more students, we see in the Chinese students more in PhD and postdoctorate work and postgraduate classes. There are a number of issues that the Indian students face. And this is again not specific to Ann Arbor. I think here it is much less. Other than financial stress, they have the psychological issues related to their studies, social issues, and some of them could be quite serious. But with time, I think, we have passed the stage of COVID and things are getting better. In India, we, of course, would like to encourage students to come and do PhD and join niche subject here. And we would like to have universities like Ann Arbor, Michigan University at Ann Arbor, to have campuses and centers and schools in India. We can discuss that part. That is a part of our policy, education policy. How we can encourage that, what are the requirements where we fall short, but possibly those we can take up during the panel discussion. I can sit there, but take questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and welcome again to Ann Arbor. Let me then introduce our two guests. First, Ashok Lahiri, who is currently member of the West Bengal Legislative Assembly. He was chairman of the Governing Council of the Indian Statistical Institute between 2020 and 2022. He retired as executive director of the Asian Development Bank in Manila in 2013. Before that, he served as chief economic advisor to the government of India, as director of the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, as a senior economist at the IMF, and as a reader at the Delhi School of Economics. A graduate in economics from Presidency College, Kolkata, he did his MA and PhD at the Delhi School of Economics. Ashok Lahiri has served as a member or chairman of various committees appointed by the government of India, including as member on fiscal responsibility legislation. He served on boards of numerous organizations, including the Securities and Exchange Board of India. He was the dean of the Asian Development Bank Board and was the chairman of Bandhan Bank. He was also a member of the 15th Finance Commission, which deals with vertical and horizontal devolution of funds between the center and the states. His recent book is titled India in Search of Glory, Political Calculus and Economy. He's also published several books and articles on electoral behavior in India. Welcome, Ashok Lahiri. Sonam Wangchuk was born in the Trans-Himalayan region of Ladakh and Jammu and Kashmir, India. Though a mechanical engineer by trade, he has been mostly working in the field of education reform for over 30 years. In 1988, he founded the Students' Educational and Cultural Movement of Ladakh, with the aim of supporting Ladakhi children and youth in educationally challenging and culturally confusing times. In 1994, he was instrumental in the launch of Operation New Hope, a triangular collaboration of the government, village communities, and the civil society to bring reforms in the government school system. He went on to found the Sekmal Alternative School Campus near Leh, a special school where the admission criteria was designed for students who had struggled academically. This experiment in school education has now been extended to an alternative university called Himalayan Institute of Alternatives, which seeks to engage youth in solving problems in their climate context while engaging in higher education. As an engineer, Sonam Wangchuk has been teaching innovation at the Semkol Alternative School and the Himalayan Institute, where, together with students, he designs and builds solar-heated buildings. In order to solve the water crisis facing mountain regions, Dr. Wangchuk invented the ice stupa artificial glacier, which stores unused stream water and releases the water in late spring. Welcome, Sonam Wangchuk. Let me also introduce and thank my colleague, Christy Merrill, who is a professor of South Asian literature and postcolonial theory, jointly appointed in the departments of Asian languages and cultures and comparative literature, which she currently chairs, where she has collaborated on efforts to establish cross-departmental programming in critical translation studies and in language justice at both the undergraduate and graduate levels. And although she's too humble to put it in here, she's also a specialist in South Asian and Indian literature and translation. Let me finally say a couple of words about the two more quick notes before we get started. First, a note of thanks. I want to thank everybody at the Center for South Asian Studies who's worked to make this event happen, as well as to our colleague in the School of Information, Professor Joyajit Pal, standing over there, who's partnering with the center on a conference that provided the impulse for bringing our two speakers to the stage today. For those interested, that conference, to be held this weekend over in North Quad, you already alluded to it, is the 5th annual conference on social media and society in India. It features 23 speakers from a variety of different perspectives, explaining how social media are impacting contemporary life and democracy in India, on panels like the business and power of influence, digital activism and social justice, and social media, local narratives, and changing voices. You'll see flyers for this poster around the room, and you can also pick up a copy here at the table. Please use the QR code to register. And that brings me to my final note. We're also passing around, have we already passed them around? We're about to pass around some note cards for the Q&A. If you have questions for our panelists, please write your question legibly, if possible, on one of those cards and pass it to our MIR students who are walking around here, Katie Marantet and Sukhpal Bular, who will collect and ask them for you with a microphone, which for this room, again, I'll emphasize is particularly important because it's hard to hear each other without the mic. With that said, thank you all for being here, and I welcome our panelists to the stage. This one's on. Where do you want to sit?
Want you to sit here?
Shouldn't you sit in the middle? Better.
No, I think so.
These are all for you. I'm just trying to.
Okay, I know. Say a few words. I'll add to my very short, it turns out very short bio. So 2 things that I think might be interesting to those of you in the room, I hope, is that I was an undergraduate here at the University of Michigan and had this dream of going to India before we had the fellowship program. And so the only way I had money to go is I was waitressing and doing other work and saved up money and went on the University of Wisconsin program on my junior year and came back and just kept going back again and again, including 1 year when I taught at an alternative school in Jaipur called the Gunther that's still going. I've told a few of the students in my undergraduate classes that if they were interested in doing work, it sounds like they've been finding lots of great opportunities, but that was one that for me was really life-changing. So you might just think about me many decades ago in this room, just wondering what my life would become and kind of picture that with some of the faces you see around the room. So just a little personalized into my bio. I think we're going to start with questions, if you could write them down, or we're Narya's going to speak to. Okay, all right. If we why don't we start?
Can I go there and speak? Or
Yes, so you have your.
Yeah, I have my thing.
Yes,
Okay.
please. Yes, you can go there and speak
Yeah.
the lecture if that's.
I'll get more confidence standing there. Thank you very much. So let me start by thanking the University of Michigan's International Institute for inviting me for today's discussion on education in India. It is indeed an honor to be able to present my I'll present my thoughts. Education in India is a very broad topic, so I'll speak on challenges for education in India. And this august audience, along with the presence of the professors in this university and Sonam Wangchuk. I don't want to say too much about Sonam. Suffice it to say, he's a celebrity. He is well known as an educator and a social reformer, not only in my country, but all over the world. You can well understand his popularity from his almost 500,000 followers on Elon Musk's X, 1.8 million followers and viewers on Facebook and YouTube. Sonam, if I have underestimated your followers, please forgive me. What a great job Sonam has done in the cold desert Ladakh, one of the remotest, coldest, and spectacularly beautiful parts of the country. The ice stupas built by his students, and the solar energy generated for supply of renewable energy have earned him the Rolex Award and worldwide acclaim. I'm a great admirer of you, Sonam. It represents a brilliant combination of principles of physics and application of engineering. Now I'm going to tell you about the importance of development of scientific knowledge among the people, especially young people, and how to spread it across a diverse and a large country that is India. Although we human beings, ever since our creation, practice learning by doing and heuristics, as all animals, including guinea pigs and mice, do, these methods did not help us to fully understand, for example, gravity, electricity, and genetics. Why I'm saying this is there is no substitute for theoretical knowledge. And places like University of Michigan. Indeed, in India, there have been too much of emphasis on bookish knowledge, which Mr. Wangchuk never tires in pointing out. And there have been little effort to connect it with application. For example, teaching children about leaves in botany, often without actually looking at a leaf. We need to correct this imbalance. As I see it, the challenge for education in India is to strike the appropriate balance between learning from books and learning through application, and spread this balanced approach to the wide expanse of the country with its diverse population and resources. One thing that I have no doubt in my mind, that if it can be done in Ladakh, it can be done anywhere. Let me now come to how it can be done. Accumulation of scientific knowledge occurs mainly in universities and other institutes of higher education. The same criticism of a disconnect with the practical world at the school level applies to some extent to higher education institutes. Much of this disconnect can be attributed to resource crunch. Pen and paper are cheap. Hadron colliders are expensive. Yet in 2023, we have sent the Chandrayaan mission to the moon, so we can do it and do it cheaper than advanced Western countries. So what is the state of higher education in India? The number of higher education institutions have multiplied since independence to over 1,000 universities, and about 17,000 colleges. The last census recorded about 38 million graduates in the country. However, large numbers of Indian children are not enrolled in school. For instance, we have a low gross enrollment ratio. That's the number of students in that particular group divided by the population in that age group. So the GER is about 29%, 25%, sorry, in higher or tertiary education in India. The corresponding figure, just for a perspective, for higher education in North America and Europe is over 80%. So we have a long way to go. The National Education Policy 2023 targets to double it to 50% by 2035. The quantity problems, enough of the facility, remains in many fields of higher education, especially medical, engineering, and engineering. Engineering is not a problem so much of quantity. There are enough engineering colleges, but quality is the problem. Furthermore, there is a quantity problem for quality educational institutes and a link between the quantity and quality problems as well. India has the largest number of engineers as well as the largest number of engineering education institutes in the world. It has a large number of medical colleges as well. Some of the products of those institutions are here for you to see in the US as software engineers, bankers, and medical doctors. Simultaneously, there is a serious scarcity of engineers and especially doctors. India needs many more doctors. You go to any city or town in India, and you will hear about schools of repute and how difficult it is to secure admission for a child in such schools. You can get the child admitted to many schools, but getting to a reputed school is an uphill task. Same is true of engineering. The challenge of getting admission to IITs and medical colleges of India is well known. About 1.2 million, yes, I mean 1.2 million appear for IIT JEE, the joint entrance examination. For how many seats? For about 16,500 seats. The joke is, it is harder to get into IITs than to MIT. The acceptance rate in IITs is about 1.5% compared to 4.5% in MIT. Same is true of medical education. You can get into medical schools, but getting into the reputed ones is a very hard job. You may say that the same problem exists in the US as well. And while you can get into some college or the other, getting into the University of Michigan is a different proposition. But in India, the gap in quality between the top-rated institutions and the next rung is a large one. With shortage of facility at home, many Indians, students, go abroad to pursue quality higher education. Our Consul General from Chicago was talking about that. In terms of students studying abroad, India is the second largest, next only to China, if I'm not mistaken. US is the most popular destination for Indian students going abroad for higher studies. Differentials in salaries, research facilities, and quality of peers play an important role in determining the quality of teachers in educational institutions. Highly qualified and effective teachers and researchers tend to congregate in a few institutions and tend to attract the best students. The US-India complementarity in higher education stems from the availability of a large number of extremely bright students in India who read, write, and speak English and are in search of quality education, and the presence of a large body of professors and researchers in the US. Will the US-India collaboration in higher education remain restricted in Indian students coming to the US for higher education? Will the trade in educational services remain restricted, in technical jargon, to Mode 2 of GATS under WTO, namely consumption of a service on a foreign in a foreign country? I do not think so. The reason is pure economics. It will be more efficient and cost effective for a few hundred students to study in their home country under a professor from abroad than all of them relocating to a foreign country for the same service. What about the salary differential between India and the US? It may be difficult for governmental institutions to pay attractive salaries, at least for now. But the problem is much less in private universities. There are quite a few of them which have been established in the last 2 decades by successful entrepreneurs and businessmen, often of the first generation. They're not for profit and for philanthropic purposes. Examples include, you must be knowing about them, Ashoka University, Kriya University, Plaksha University, and Shiv Dadar University. This collaboration is particularly important for STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, and medicine. The problems of education in India start at the school level, not just in higher education. While I won't go into the details, it is crucial to highlight that higher education cannot exist without a strong foundation in school education. Like higher education, schools face issues of both quantity and quality, though their nature differs at each level. India's vast population makes any discussion of education a matter of large numbers. In 2021-23, there are about 1.5 billion schools with 265 million students, nearly 50% of the US population. While some areas lack schools, most habitations have accessible schools. At independence, many children, especially girls, were not in school. However, enrollment in elementary education has improved. And now it exceeds 100%. You'll say, how is it more than 100%? You have enrollment ratio, you look at how many children are in school, and you look at the number of such children in the appropriate age group. There are some people who are repeating, some older girls, older boys. So gross enrollment ratio can be more than 100%. So gross enrollment ratio has exceeded 100% for the last few years. What has helped it? There are two things that have happened in recent times. One is the midday meal scheme, and the other is right to education, which makes it as obligatory for the government to provide it. But what has happened, and I think it's a good thing, the number of school-going children has reduced. It has gone down by 6%. You will say, how? Because the fertility rate is falling. India's fertility rate has declined below 2.1%, 2.1, which is the replacement rate. So you'll see more and more decline in the number of school-going children. So there are some schools now have only a single student. Previously, it was thriving in the 60s and 70s. A pressing issue today is the lack of foundational literacy and numeracy. The problems galore. You see, I've talked about higher education, but I must touch upon foundational literacy and numeracy. Because what is very important for a little girl or a little boy to know is how to read, write, and how to calculate. That's foundational literacy and numeracy. The problem is severe among children whose parents have never attended school. The no detention policy, which promoted automatic promotion until class 8, further worsened learning gaps by shrouding the problem. Exams have now been reintroduced in classes 5 and 8. India's low GER, gross enrollment ratio of 26% in higher education, stems partly from the problem of poor school education or poor school completion rates. You can't go for higher education if you haven't completed school. Without finishing school, students cannot pursue higher studies. Education reformers like Sonam Wangchuk are working to tailor the system to local needs. Addressing school education challenges is key to solving India's larger education crisis. Now, let me tell you about responsibilities. How do we ensure that scientific and technological advance occurs while minimizing environmental damage and threats to human existence posed by advanced weaponry and artificial intelligence? Technological advances should be combined with good citizenship. Growth of a citizenry of technological robots leading unexamined lives is fraught with peril. This can and must be prevented by developing the second pillar of education, humanities. That includes the study of history, philosophy, language, and culture. It is extremely myopic to give short shrift to these so-called softer disciplines that can temper the excesses of technological advance. It is concerning that these disciplines have shriveled in recent times. Distracted as we are by shining objects and the immediate gratification provided by social media and robotics, the scientific method is under attack. Scientific method is how we learn and correct mistakes. Some people are now questioning much of what we thought are settled facts or settled knowledge. For example, the US landing Neil Armstrong on the moon, or the Holocaust, or the Darwinian theory of evolution. At the same time, a burgeoning of software skills and hardware knowledge, artificial intelligence, and machine learning means that some aspects of traditional education now appear elitist and supposedly irrelevant. With a revolution in transportation and communication technology, the world has become a global village, and with radical transformation of the destructive ability of weaponry, the downside risk of misunderstanding each other has magnified 1,000 times. We need humanities for understanding each other better. Scientific method is under attack precisely because the critical perspectives offered by the humanities is missing. One cannot emphasize enough the complementarity of the two pillars of education. Shakespeare and Einstein are equally important. I have told you the twin problems of education in India from my experience as someone who has studied, taught, and participated in public service in India. Perhaps they confront education systems all over the world, but with different degrees of severity. The main message that I want to leave you with is India has exported erudition since independence. Therefore, here for you to see. Some was imported from the US by students visiting here. It is high time to import some from the US for delivery in India at a lower cost per recipient. A more cost-effective mechanisms can scale up the service and work wonders for not only accelerating development in India, but also for the mutual benefit of our two large democracies to augment mutual understanding and ultimately produce good world citizens. I'm sorry if I've taken too long. Thank you very much.
Make sure.
But then audible, I think. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. And I bring you greetings from the high Himalayas. And I'm grateful for making me feel at home with a very cold afternoon today. It's been some 30 hours since I flew from Leh in Ladakh, which was also like this. To deal with jet lag, I was explaining, I try to keep an event the day I land, because if you can't sleep, then you go till the night and then sleep properly and then come in tune with the time here. So yes, thank you for all the warmth here. And thank you, Dr. Lahiri, for making my job a little easier, because you gave a picture of education in India at present has been very old-fashioned, examination-oriented, not much creativity, rote learning, memorizing, and all that. I think we took it too seriously when the British introduced the concept of basics of education as 3 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic. We do a bit too much of just reading, just writing, just arithmetics, without really looking at applying it and creating new things. And then our examination system are all paperwork, paper knowledge, paper examination, and paper degrees, when the world is not really paper, it's three-dimensional. So the current situation is gloomy, and perhaps because of that, as was discussed by the two gentlemen here, a lot of university-level students leave India to many countries, particularly to the United States. That's at the university level. At the schools level, students may not leave in such numbers, but I find it very humiliating to see that entire schools are emigrating to boards that are not in India, like International Baccalaureate, Cambridge. Whole schools are moving and shifting to other boards because they find the current boards in India not as creative, not as happening. But then I have wondered, was it really always this, that we just do lower order thinking and activities in school, like memorizing and just information and knowledge and not application? Is it really new to India when we talk of critical thinking, analytical thinking, and experiential learning? Looking back at past, it doesn't seem this way. It seems India was way, way, way more mature and advanced about wisdom and knowledge that was about learning, maybe not to large numbers of people, but who did practice. It was a different scenario. And to see that, I looked into some examples of ancient Indian wisdom. 2,500 years ago, Gautama the Buddha talked about wisdom and learning. And it's very interesting to see that what we today think is new and modern ideas in education were practiced back then in India. So Buddha, explaining to his disciples, says there are 3 types of wisdom or learning: pragya or prajna, shrutmay pragya. Shrutmay is read or heard from scriptures or from teachers. That's the most superficial level of learning, he says. just like the 3 R's, read and heard wisdom, only to do with the head. Passes on. Easy come, easy go. So he explains that Shrutamai Pragya, heard or read wisdom, is like drawing a line on water. As you draw, so it erases. Doesn't last, doesn't do you much good. Then he says this next level of wisdom is Chintanmay Pragya. That's Chintan, reflection, thinking, analysis, critical, analytical thinking that we celebrate today. He explained this 2,500 years ago. Chintanmay Pragya is where you should go, not just heard, read, but self-reflecting, analyzing whether it's true or not, and then only accepting. Now, this, he said, is like drawing lines, not on water, a little more permanent, on the beach, on the sand, little more, but not very lasting. Then he said, the third and much higher wisdom is bhavanamai pragya. What is experienced? When you become that, when you become one with what you are learning, whether it is in doing something or in spiritual attainments, to experience it. And today we talk of a shallow level of that as experiential learning. So it wasn't that India didn't know how knowledge and wisdom are gained. We somehow lost the way in the middle, some point, perhaps due to, slavery and colonization and so on. Otherwise, the past was glorious. That's why, just playing with words, I often tell my students that past, perfect. Present, if present continues, future tense. Yeah? That's the grammar of learning or education in India. So past was perfect, but if the present continues, then future does look tense. And that's why students in hordes are leaving the nation, which is not a great thing to happen to a country. And what I would rather like to see is that they should go. They should go to all the places of the world to learn what you don't get in your own country, something very special that that country has to offer. Why not? We should all learn from every place. And there shouldn't be this, like you say, trade deficit. I would say a deficit of educational migration, where we send young people everywhere, but very few come to India. So that deficit, when balanced, is a healthy educational scenario where people come, people go, they do what they need to from whichever parts of the world. So India can be a great source of learning, especially in today's times when what our education system has been doing is leading to some very undesirable outcomes. The situation that we find our planet today is actually thanks to this education system. And the current education system was rooted in a time when this world was reeling in shortages, shortage of food, shortage of clothing and material well-being, which is basic and very important. But today we have more than overdone that. Today people are not dying as much because of shortage of food as because of excess of food. Today our air, water, land is unbreathable, undrinkable, untouchable. because of our material abundance that we use the current education system to create. So today we are more on the excess side. So we have to think of redefining education to heal rather than further hurt the planet. This was based at a time when we were coming out of an era of scarcity. For millions of years, human beings have lived in scarcity. And therefore, with science and technology, we solved and more than solved so much that itself became a problem. So more of the same fuel will not result in a different outcome, as Einstein said. We have to change that. And therefore, today, rather than only thinking of supply side management, I see that whether it is for development, we only look at the supply side of material goods, or even to solve the climate crisis, the environmental challenges, we only look at the supply side of things, which means we are looking at how to drive cars, just that we'll drive electric cars. We are looking at the same use of power, electricity, just that it should come from some green source, solar or hydro. But we are not looking at demand side reduction, not just to change or fiddle with what you take now from another source, and not at reducing the use itself on the demand side. With this strategy, even solar will be poisonous to the planet. Wind may not help. Nothing can help if we keep demanding and desiring the same things at the same rate of increase, if we don't look at the demand side. And that's exactly what traditional wisdom teaches us, particularly in India, and I'm sure in many parts of the world. I particularly think today we need what Buddha again said 2,500 years ago. He said, it's a greater achievement for a human being to conquer a single desire than to fulfill 1,000 desires. Amazing. Here we are running, chasing after fulfilling 1,000 desires, and when we fulfill that, the next one raises its head, and the next one, it's a never-ending game. Whereas if we were to extinguish, dissolve, or conquer desires and consider that as a greater achievement, our role models were not billionaires and tycoons who have fulfilled so many desires and yet are feeling poor, but rather those who have come down from 1,000 to 900 to 800 to 2010 and towards ending all desire. Now, this kind of approach, I feel, can only solve the planet's crisis. And this could be something that India could offer in its universities, and the world could come and learn how to live harmony with nature in the current time. India has a tradition of vipassana, yoga. These are very scientific techniques of learning to eliminate desires and become rich. There are two ways of becoming rich. One is to amass, the other is to dissolve desires. So these could bring a harmony of this trade deficit or educational deficit between the world. And so while young people from India go to other countries to learn about cutting edge technologies in these fields, people could come there to learn about cutting edge technologies of the inner world, inner technologies that are equally important to solve the problems. Anyway, not going into too much detail, what we try in our part of the world is these, what we call 3 H's of education rather than 3 R's. 3 R's are all to do with the head, whereas for a holistic, balanced human being, you need as much skills of the hands, not just a bright head, but skilled hands that can do things, fix things, survive in hardships or when things don't work. And that also is not enough. The best of schools and universities do a little bit of the hands part. Most of our schools and universities in India are stuck with the head part alone, theoretical paper knowledge. Some try a little bit of hands-on experiential. But education would be meaningful to make this world a happy place only when it goes on to the 3rd H, the kind heart, a heart full of empathy and emotional maturity. That's what the world needs to deal with, both economic challenges of rich and poor and so on, and ecological challenges that the planet is facing. So again, in the third, the H of heart, India can play a big role to attract the world. It's just that we don't think of these as full-fledged courses in mainstream universities. That thinking needs to be changed, especially with what's happening to the planet with human activities. So out there in Ladakh, we have been experimenting with a 3H school, an alternative school where students who happen to be failures or those who struggled in conventional schools, that's the criteria of admission, simply because nobody takes care of them. So we started taking care of them and started giving them education in very hands-on ways. And even those who are called failures become stars when it is all, holistic in not just the head, but hands and heart all involved. So much so that the school became self-reliant because students were growing their own food, keeping cows and milking them, setting up their own power plants, heating with the sun. These are the expenses that a school in Ladakh has. Huge expenses on heating and power and food in winters. When students do all these things and learn, doing is learning. Without doing, learning is like Shrutamai Pragya. So while their learning happens, they raise enough funds to make the school self-reliant. We don't need to charge the students or ask for grants because they're producing most of the things. Inspired by that, we went on to set up an alternative university. We said, if teenagers of a high school can make the school self-reliant, then young people in their 20s should be able to change the world. Why should they be subjected to sitting in a classroom lecture after lecture after lecture? So we said 30% in classroom, 70% outdoors. They should be out changing the world and experiencing the world and connecting with the world and learning skills of problem solving, collaborating with others, and so on. And it's an experiment. We don't know whether it will succeed. It's only 5 years into it, but already different technologies that we developed at this school and the alternative university are being used by different needy users. For example, solar heated buildings. Indian Army, with its soldiers in the coldest places, needs these technologies. And our school and its students give that technology to them. And in the process, they pay us like to any other supplier of technology. When students and faculty working on a project earns revenues that can sustain the university, then the university doesn't have to charge huge fees. And when that happens, education becomes democratic. Nobody who cannot afford a little bit of imagination and sweat, we say that's the currency in which they pay, not in money, which not everybody has. So education becomes democratic, education becomes experiential, education becomes contextual. In the context, what are the problems that need to be solved? And they become part of the solution and not the problem. And education becomes transdisciplinary. So to solve a problem like a village affected by climate change, where people had all moved out because there was no water, our students started making these artificial glaciers to store the wasting water in winter, to partially replace the lost glaciers. And then we saw that the water was there, but not enough to make today's young people want to live in the village. So the students from the School of Renewable or Responsible Architecture came and upgraded their homes into solar heated homestays. The students from the School of Responsible Tourism introduced tourism in their village. Now they have some water to rehabilitate a lost village, and they have an additional income from solar heated homestays where responsible tourism happens. So that kind of interdisciplinary, hands-on education could be the future of education that we are trying to experiment, which could free universities from need for huge funds and so on. There will always be, but a big part could be generated by the university itself. And that would be the best way of learning for the students also, because they can't be learning sitting, listening to lectures, and then paying fees for those, and not then absorbing in the bhavanamay way, the experiential way. So that's what we are doing. The rest, I think, we'll have in a conversation. Thank you very much for your patience, and look forward to a discussion. Thank you.
Thank you both. Please, you should have an index card, and please write down questions. We have some graduate students who can come around and collect your questions and read them, I believe. I think we already have some questions. There's one here. There's a couple here. Waiting for the questions. You can read over the questions. Maybe I'll ask if, and I just want to make sure both of you have your mics on.
Yes, yes.
If either of you have a question for each other, I can give you a chance to know, or you'd rather wait and start with these questions.
How can I ask Sonam any question? He is, he is so lucid.
Okay, we can start with the questions. Is that?
Sonam, how do you feel about maybe to give it back to you, so we can
I don't know what the mic situation is.
Why don't you come here?
Here, I'll hand you my.
For Sonam Wangchuk, how do you feel about premier educational institutes like IITs, IIMs having reservations based on gender or socio-economic background?
Thank you.
This is from Aditi Kandri from SEAS.
Yes. Reservations are to bring some kind of equilibrium so that all unrepresented sections are represented. So first from socio-economic ones or from as in India, you have scheduled tribes, castes, and other weaker sections. What I've always felt is that it's not right to keep a reservation forever. It doesn't even help those who the government tries to help, because very soon people who have availed that reservation and have, used it and risen in society start sending their children and their children, and it becomes a creamy layer that stops others from benefiting. So I always wanted to suggest to the government that every time somebody uses it, the generation that uses it then should be out of it. They have now been equalized or uplifted, and therefore they should not be eligible so that others can take. That way, the last person of that so-called weaker section will also be able to avail of it. Similarly, with gender also, as long as there's need, there should be, but the idea should be to slowly come out of it and not be left with it forever. These, I think, reservations were supposed to be for 10 years
10
or
years.
something at the time of independence. Now it is 70 something years and it's still going on. That's not very healthy, even if it was for a healthy reason that they did it.
Should I add something?
Yes, please.
See, the scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and other backward classes. Now, these are abbreviations for economically weaker sections. It's undeniably true that these groups have suffered from oppression or castigation, whatever you may call it. But as Mr. Wangchuk pointed out, 50 years have passed, and we haven't been able to get rid of reservation. Now, here I may point out one of the problems that many people, experts like Mr. Wangchuk, will point out, that these SCs, STs, and OBCs have become an abbreviation for economically weaker sections. But in a country like India, since I have the power to give income certification, it's extremely difficult to find out what is the income of a person. The elected representative gives a certificate. Now, what do I lose? If I deny the certification, then I lose votes. If I give the certification, then it's no cost of I'm not spending any money. So India is in search of some method by which income can be determined. If it could be done, it would become very easy. Otherwise, it's just a shorthand for economically weaker section. But this, I must add another thing, to be the first generation educated person is a great challenge. We don't realize how fortunate we are to see that our mother can read, our father can read, there are a few books in their house. Since I have worked face to face with such people in a house where a little boy or a girl has never seen a book and parents cannot read. It's a great infirmity. It's a major problem.
All right, we have one question coming from Kiran. In the world where simple jobs will be lost to artificial intelligence, what are your views on the role of education? This is addressed to everyone.
You first.
Please. Views on education.
In artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Regarding
Yeah.
artificial intelligence.
I don't necessarily look at artificial intelligence as a threat. It can be used to do things that people may anyway not want to do, and people could rise to more creative things that people should be doing. And yeah, so in education, also, I think it should be about how best to use artificial intelligence for various challenges that we have. And most jobs then would go towards using this new tool and doing away with things that conventionally would use or waste human capacities. So that way, I think it could be a good thing only. And I think every time there was something new, people always discussed with a lot of skepticism. I think that must have happened when fire was discovered. Similarly, it happened when simple computers were discovered now or invented now with artificial intelligence also. So natural intelligence will always be needed. That's what I think.
Yeah, and in fact, what Mr. Wangchuk pointed out, if I remember right from my little reading of history, during the Industrial Revolution, when ginning machines were invented and weaving machines were invented in England, the Luddites, if I'm not mistaken, were burning those textile mills. Now, similarly, in my country, I remember in the 60s when computers were introduced in banks, my leftist friends were agitating. No computers will be introduced. But introduction of ginning machines, introduction of automobiles, it must have to replace horse carts by automobiles, must have posed a threat. But human ingenuity, I believe that no matter how artificial intelligence excel, human intelligence will still be having the supreme power. There will be frictional costs. There will be problems of adjustment, but they're surmountable.
The next question for Sonam. What ways do you suggest for introducing, or what practical challenges would you see for introducing ancient methods in the currently established education system?
Ancient methods.
Yeah.
Okay. Not in everything, but like I was saying, towards spirituality, towards fulfillment, not just through material goods, you have a lot to learn from our ancient cultures. There, it will be particularly good. But in material technologies, maybe the modern education and modern capacities are better. So it should be a balance, because no matter how much material wealth or well-being is generated, as I said, unless you also manage the demand side along with the supply, it will not result in overall well-being.
No.
All right, the next question is a question posed generally. The education budget as a proportion of the total union budget has reduced from 4.77% in fiscal year 2013 to 2014 to 2.5% in fiscal year 24 to 25 under the BJP government. RTE and midday meals were introduced by VPA, and the BJP is inherently against it, vehemently against it. What are the
microphone closer?
Yeah, I can't
Oh,
hear.
sorry. What are the policies that the BJP has introduced to improve the quality of education and the numerous and on-ground reality, or when the on-ground reality suggests otherwise?
This is for you.
Okay. There's a very specific question about the union governments, what it has done in education. See, money is always a problem. Now, no matter what you look at education, we're not spending enough. I don't think any sane Indian will say we're spending too much on education or too much on health. With some problems in our border, we are spending too little on defense, we are spending too little on infrastructure. The question is of prioritization. And here, the other thing that you need to keep in mind is two things. One, education is a concurrent subject. So you need to look at the state budgets and the central budget. And here, the primary responsibility of school education or elementary education is with the states. And second problem is often we have this simplistic attitude that money will solve all the problem. As you know, in economics, we talk about how much money you are spending. That's an important criterion. Then you have to think of the output. You've spent money on building a school. Did you build the school? And then the outcome. Are you producing students who can read, write, their foundational literacy? I'm not totally convinced that the problems of Indian education is simply because of money. I don't believe that. We still haven't found methods. For example, teacher absenteeism. There's a major problem of teacher absenteeism. There is a major problem of students going to school, and because they come from a particular background, after the midday meal, they go home. So, beyond that, to give you a very reasoned answer is not possible for me. I haven't brought the data, but I will only submit that it's too simplistic to say that the only problem in Indian education is the government of India is not spending enough money. Apart from spending money, how we spend the money, how effective it is. Mr. Wangchuk has already explained how in his school he is trying to minimize the cost by working or finding solutions or things that can be earn some money for the school. I don't think it's a very good answer, but that should suffice for the time being.
I'll just add, because this is an insight that both people in India and anybody interested in India, in education in India should have. I think why in India budgets on education is low and going lower is mainly because, please correct me if you think I'm wrong, mainly because Indian society is divided into private schools and government schools. Those who matter, those who have a say, have their children in the private schools, safely placed. And that's financed by themselves. A huge part of their income actually goes in this, apart from the tax you pay, goes on educating your children. So now the rest of the country who do not have that say nor the money are left in the government schools. And people who are running the government do not have a personal stake in those schools because their children are safely placed in private schools. So for the government, it doesn't matter so much if they do not spend or even cut down, because those who can shout have their children in private schools. They'll never say much about the government school budgets going down. And as people become more and more aware of importance of education, they're taking their children simply out of government schools and going for private schools. So they're just leaving them. And that also explains why schools have fewer and fewer children, more than what the population, what were you saying? Decrease. Yeah, fertility rate. It's disproportionately going towards fewer and fewer children in government schools because people have less and less faith in the government schools, very unfortunately, because those who can make things run have their children in private. So those who have their children do not have a say. And that's the sad reality of Indian schools, unfortunately.
In fact, this very important point that Mr. Wangchuk has pointed out. See, both are true. The number of school-going children overall is declining. And more children are going to private school rather than public school. Why? Because public school quality has become a concern. I went to a government school myself. Has the quality deteriorated? I don't know. I haven't seen any study which is doing a temporal comparison of what it was in the 1960s and what it is now. But comparatively, private schools, at least with their glitzy looks and better rooms and so on, children from better, higher income levels offer a more attractive alternative. And furthermore, what is happening in government schools, this, as you know, now things have changed in the United States, but firing anyone in the government is a very difficult proposition. All government jobs are for life, at least in India. So with only carrot and no sticks, quality becomes a problem.
And then it's a vicious cycle.
It is a vicious cycle.
Hannes, how are we on time?
We'll do one more question each, and then we'll wrap it up.
This question is for the both of you. Just how Mr. Wangchuk mentioned the current education system. For both of you.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Just how the current education system in India was mentioned as a British introduction. Many claims are made that the history taught in Indian schools is largely distorted by colonial narratives or influences. How true or accurate is this? And should governments be allowed to politically intervene into textbook contents?
Come again?
Should governments be allowed to politically intervene into textbook contents?
See, I'm a great believer in academic freedom. Academic freedom is very important because we know from history that only scientific method and questioning what we know leads to greater knowledge. Now, when it comes to textbooks, you may have doubts. It's almost like the Supreme Court. Who will appoint the Supreme Court judge? It has to be the elected representatives of the people with some experts. Similarly, textbooks, who will design the textbooks? Some educational experts, but an elected government appoints them. And mind you, in a vibrant democracy such as India, people are never quiet. You do anything, there are points and counterpoints. And I welcome that. Now, do I have any views on how textbooks should be designed? Though I am a failed teacher, I used to teach for 13 years. I don't think I'll get into that, especially if you're talking about history. Now, history is such an important topic. I don't think I'll give any opinion on that, except to say that leave it to the experts. Let the best experts in history decide what the children should learn. And let's not interfere in that.
I would agree.
One last question.
This question reads, Can your model of dharmic values-driven education sustain in the era of ChatGPT-like tools to accelerate learning and ethics or stewardship of our planet?
What was the beginning?
Can your model of dharmic values-driven education sustain itself in the era of ChatGPT-like tools?
Yeah. So I was saying the same thing at Harvard last month. Somebody said, in the era of AI, where does your concept of desire and dharmic education go? So I was saying that actually, if you ask ChatGPT or artificial intelligence, the best way to optimize and manage the resources of the planet, I think the answer will be something like that, a dharmic education where everybody gets equal and it's driven by demand side management of reducing, minimizing demands rather than keeping on maximizing, I would say, supplies and what you call growth. So really artificial intelligence, I think, will come to the same. So it may help.
Okay. I should get my microphone back. Thank you all for being here, and especially let's give a warm round of applause for our panelists.